Okay, so we've returned. Let's talk about obedience. When authority tells us what to do. And just as a note, this is Jim Jones. He was the leader of the People's Temple, a cult, and this cult ended in the death of hundreds at Jonestown. We will harken back to him later. So, what changes from when the pressure comes from above? Okay, so last time we talked about conformity, and this was about pressure from a group and with no direct commanding. Today, though, we're going to talk about obedience and pressure from an authority figure. You're given instruction or an order, and that person usually has some sort of power or status. Okay, some examples: an instructor or a student, a supervisor or boss, an employee, coach, athlete, office subordinate, doctor, staff, or patient. And again, so obedience itself is not in and of itself bad. We do, as a society, depend on legitimate authority because we do need laws. We do need like emergency responses. We need workplaces. We need schools. So there has to be certain levels of obedience. But the question is, when do we stop complying? So, what makes somebody an authority figure? Is it the title they have? Their expertise? How about their uniform? What institution or organization are they a part of? Or the control they have over consequences? Or all of it, some of it, none of it. Again, conformity just says everybody else is doing it. Obedience says somebody with authority told me to do it. So we're going to spend some time with Milgram here because it's one of psychology's most famous studies that asked that's a question about that second kind of pressure and how powerful it can be. So, this does surround the Holocaust, and this is a famous photo from the Nuremberg trials. Because after World War II and during the Nuremberg trials, which were held in which we prosecuted Nazis for war crimes, we did confront something that was disturbing in that how could ordinary people participate in harmful actions under authority? Why did simply ordinary or normal people who were your neighbors or uncles or friends do such horrible things? Was the obedience caused by who they were? A dispositional attribution, like we talked about last week, or the situations they were placed in? Situational attribution. Stanley Milgram did want to study this. He didn't want to explain the Holocaust. He wanted to study obedience. So, this was in the early 60s. He conducted this at Yale, and the legitimacy of this place is important. It's Yale. Now, here's how it was set up. I will do my best to explain this. Now, the participant believed that they were taking part in a learning and memory study. The roles were allegedly random, in that the participant was either going to be a teacher or a learner, but they were actually not random, they were rigged. The real participant was always the teacher, okay? The subject that administers the shock in your picture. And the learner was a Confederate, an actor that was in on the study. Now, the learner was placed in another room and strapped to a chair, so your participant could not see them, but they could hear them. And the participant did see this person get strapped up to electrodes and was told that the participant was going to receive a shock. And they did receive a sample shock that helped make the setup very believable. And so what they did was that the participant was told to read pairs of words, and basically the learner or your confederate would recite the word pairs. And any time the confederate got the pairs of words wrong, they were given a shock. And again, it's important to know there were not actually any shocks given. Again, the confederate was an actor. But the participant believed they were giving actual shocks because the actor did respond as if they were giving actual shocks. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry, guys. Here we go. So, so again, like at this point, would you actually take part in this study? I probably would. It sounds legitimate. It's with Yale. I can trust Yale. And again, they say that there isn't going to be like long-term damage to the person. And so I'm not signing up. Nobody's going to sign up for like, would you like to seriously harm somebody today? I'm not signing up for that, but it seems like this is a legitimate study conducted by Yale, and the researcher Milgram is in a white coat. It sounds legitimate. And the shock, it didn't start at a high level. That sample shock was just like a little bit of a little jolt. That's all. These are actual pictures. The top left one is a participant. The top right is your actor confederate getting strapped up to the fake electrodes. And that's Milgram at the bottom with the shock box. That is fake. Okay, so I'll try to explain, and you can see this, but there were okay, there were 30 switches. They went all the way from 15 to 450 volts with increasing labels. Now, the key here is the participant doesn't choose 0 or 450 when the actor makes the wrong decision or gives the wrong answer. What happens is they make repeated smaller decisions. So they give the first wrong answer, okay, 15 volts, not a big deal. Second wrong answer, bump it up to 30. Next, 45, and so on and so forth, all the way up to 450 if we must. Now, does a 15-volt increase feel like a big decision? Not really. Now, just as a note, the researcher was nearby, of course, wearing his lab coat, and instructed the teacher or the participant to continue, especially if the participant started to hesitate. The researcher used prompts like, please continue. But here's the thing. As the voltage increased, the actor didn't stay quiet. So, in regard to this, at 15 volts, would anybody stop immediately? I want to know when you would start, when you would refuse. Because you think that you're giving legitimate shocks to a human. How about 75? Because at 75 volts, the actor is grunting. And again, you think this is real. How about 150? The actor's demanding to be released. 180, screaming that they can't stand the pain. 270, there's an intense scream. 300, now we're not getting much noise. And at Anything above that, complete silence. And again, just so we're clear here, and I'll go back for a second, this goes to 450. So 300 plus, it is silence. So you can make the assumption as a participant that that person on the other side of the wall is either unconscious or dead. But the experimenter tells you, please continue. If you say, no, I really need to stop. I think I'm hurting them, or I really need to go, they'll just say, please continue. Do you stop? Are you going to stop? What's going to make you stop? What would make it difficult to stop? I'll throw a couple things out there. Yale, we're at Yale. You feel responsible. You signed the paper saying you would take part. There's also somebody in a white coat that seems very legitimate. And I've already gone this far. We're already in, like 45 minutes into this thing. I don't want to ruin this. I mean, the researcher told me this is safe. Why shouldn't I believe them? So, what do you think that most people did? Okay, so what Milgram did before he actually ran this study is that he asked experts to make this same prediction as to, okay, what are people going to do? Here's Adolf Eichmann, one of the masterminds behind the Holocaust, to say the least, at Nuremberg. He was a very ordinary man. We'll talk about the banality of evil as we move on through this class and how ordinary people can do extraordinarily horrific things. He is a phenomenal example. Anyways, the experts that Milgram consulted did expect that most would stop and that people wouldn't get to 450 volts. These were experts. Only a tiny minority were expected to administer the highest shock. Because the experts at this time did assume that conscience would win and people would walk away, that harming a stranger would be way too extreme, and that people wouldn't actually do that. A normal person wouldn't do that. And as we're talking about this, I think those are things that we probably think of as well. And why are we so confident that a normal person wouldn't do that? People wouldn't harm strangers. Our conscience would win out. My personal values and character would never allow me to do such a thing. What kind of person would continue? Now, here's the thing, and maybe we say that they're cruel or weak, those that would continue. But we're good at predicting what our values say that we should do and that what we would do. But again, that's not necessarily the same as predicting what we would actually do under pressure. So how accurate were these actual predictions? 65% of participants continued all the way to 450 volts. 2 out of 3 participants went all the way to the very end of the fake shock generator. 100% went to at least 300 volts. Everybody. Now, they didn't do it laughing and giggling. Many showed a lot of distress while they continued, but they still did it. The distress they experienced did not make them stop. 2 out of 3 went all the way, believing that they were shocking this other human potentially to death. And all of them went to the point that the other human was silent in response to the shocks. Now, this is important, okay? Now, the obedience, it doesn't mean agreement. I have to make this clear. Just because they obeyed I'm sure that the majority, I told the researcher that I do not want to continue, and they said, please continue. It doesn't mean that they agreed with what they did. It doesn't mean that they were comfortable doing what they did. And it doesn't mean that they were cruel. You can believe something's wrong and feel terrible and protest, but you still do it and comply with what you're told to do. So, what does that tell us? Just because you're uncomfortable, it doesn't mean that you're going to resist. Your character and sense of morality might not be enough to overcome situational pressures. They might know that this is wrong, but they still obey. Knowing something feels wrong and actually refusing to continue are two very different behaviors. So when we need to be careful when we talk about these results because what kind of person would actually do this? Because your gut reaction to that 65% and the type of person that might keep going is that like they're evil, heartless, sadistic psychopaths. But here's the thing, okay? Like, remember week four, the fundamental attribution error. We immediately jump to they did it because of who they were. We don't take into consideration very commonly that it's the situation that possibly drove their behavior. We observe the continued shocks, and so we immediately inferred that they're cruel, weak, or bad. But what we haven't considered is the authority, the fact that they were sitting at Yale, the gradual escalation, their commitment to it, the responsibility associated with the study, being in an unfamiliar situation, the social expectations of the situation. So, as we observe this, we might attribute the obedience to personality, but we fail to appreciate the power of the experimental situation. Now, that does not mean that there's no responsibility. There's still always a choice. So, explaining situational influence, it's not the same as excusing behavior. So, what exactly was happening in Milgram's situation that made it so difficult to stop? Okay, so how can we explain sometimes how this works? So, again, I just have to provide the explanation that, again, ordinary people can do horrific things. The situation can play a large role in this. That will never excuse behavior. It does not condone the behavior. It doesn't excuse the behavior from consequences. Behavior is behavior. I just have to make that disclaimer here. So, this slide is really important to me because we might be like, well, we can overcome this situation. We would recognize like, okay, we have to stop. This is starting to hurt somebody. But this slide is important because again, sometimes we get a little too far into it. That's why we keep going. Okay. So let's just suppose, okay, 250 volts is way too far. Okay, 250 is too far. I made like morally, I'm like, okay, that's too far. We're past anything morally okay in this experiment. Okay, I made that's my line, 250. So is 235 too far then? Apparently not. If 235 is okay, like, why not 250? Is 220 too far? 205? 190? If 250 is unacceptable, like literally, what about 235? Okay, so if 235 was or is, why was 220 okay? Each decision is going to be linked to the previous one. This is gradual escalation. So it's baby steps here. Each step only is slightly worse than the previous. It's not big steps. It's easy to justify one more. Just one more small step. It's only 15 volts. It's not that bad. And previous compliance creates commitment. Well, I already did 235. What's 250? It's really not that different. So if at 150 I say like this is okay, this is acceptable. Then at 165 it's only kind of different. And at 180 it's only 15 more. But eventually I'm way beyond what I would have agreed to initially. If Milgram would have gotten 65% of the experimenters, or would he have gotten 65 of the experimenters to do it if he would have started with 450? No, probably a very different outcome. The situation was constructed through escalation. Stopping also means confronting. So if this is wrong now, why wasn't it wrong 15 volts ago? And that really does create psychological pressure. Because if it's wrong now, I was probably wrong just a couple of steps ago, too. And I have to face that and own up to that. So I really should just keep going. And it's usually not these situations. Okay, just some examples could be things like unethical workplace behavior and the escalation of that, or hazing, something that goes from, maybe it's not too harmful to all of a sudden, I don't know, maybe we're cutting somebody's finger off. Abusive group norms, escalating dishonesty. We start with a tiny lie, and all of a sudden we're lying about putting a third mortgage on the house. I don't know. Boundary violations. It's so again, it's a small escalation and that gets bigger and bigger. It's usually not where we started good and then it's one horrific decision automatically. It usually doesn't work like that. It's also just one small compromise, one little white lie, one little step, one unethical decision, and then there's another, and then another, and then another. It's like somebody that commits fraud or embezzlement. Okay, maybe just start with $10. That's another $10. It's like 25, maybe 35, 50 here and there, maybe 100. Okay, maybe it's 1,000, 2,000 here and there. And all of a sudden, we're at $1.5 million is what we've embezzled. It's not, they did not embezzle 1.5 right off the bat, but it's these small little steps. And all of a sudden, we have escalated and escalated and escalated. And it's this giant crime. And how did we get here? This is how we get here. Swiss line literally, why will you administer 450 volts? It was repeatedly, will you go one step further? Okay, same thing with like war. I've had this one's from you meant so well. A war, it's a slippery slope, but so it goes from, yeah, what would you do? It becomes, what will you do? Becomes, oh my God, what have you done? You think about something like the Holocaust, it didn't start with gas chambers. It did not start with gas chambers. It started with propaganda and small baby steps. Started with words like vermin, then just honestly prejudicial beliefs that turn into some discriminatory behavior and isolation and specific clothing, and then movement into labor camps. I know I'm missing a lot here. And that allowed for small steps to make things a little bit worse. And when you take baby steps like that, people can also normalize those baby steps. You're not doing it all at once. And as long as you don't do it all at once, people can accept that which you're doing and make it normal before you take the next step. Until all of a sudden we are at the point with, oh my God, what have we all done? So I'm going to stop there just for a couple minutes, and then we'll return for a little bit more.